Hello and welcome to Heather and Hops. My name is Kat and I'm a knitter based in Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom. If you're new, it's lovely to welcome you to this little space. If you've been here for a while, it's lovely to see you again. It is such a... I always find different words, but it's such a treat to be able to connect through this platform. So thank you so much for coming back. I hope you are well. I hope that no matter what's going on, I know the weather's been really a bit wild, really up and down. So if you're experiencing snow and hail again, I'm very sorry, but I hope that it's not too out of the ordinary if you are experiencing that. Yeah, this week we're going to talk about my, we've been referring to it as the rebel dress. I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail than I normally talk about items. So if you are new, this is a slightly different video, I guess. Last week and next week will be more of the consistent style of videos I put out, more of a knitting journal as opposed to a in-depth thing. Anyway, Little Mai is on her way. Little Mai is the affectionate name that I give my kitten Audrey, who is basically the mascot and really the star of this channel. I might see if she will join us for this one. She opted to not sit on her sofa but on the arm of the sofa, and you can't, maybe you can see just a bit of her. This is her here. But if you've been here before, you know what Audrey looks like. If not, I'll try and put in a few little clips at the end of little Audrey. So my rebel dress, I called it that because it doesn't have a name. So if we want to come up with a name together again, that would be fun. But I called it that because I used alpaca, which is quite drapey and it's not the lightest weight wool for such an item. Really, it's quite heavy, but I wanted the drape and I wanted something that would feel lovely against my skin, and I wouldn't have been upset if it did stretch. I know that alpaca is subject to growth. I just picked out a bit of nature from my dress. As I say, when it comes to knitwear and items that I wear, I am really hard wearing on them. I will happily lay on the woodland floor in whatever garment I am wearing. So yeah, it is a fairly short dress. This you can adjust with simple, very simple straps. I used a double I-cord, a flat back, which is hard to see really, and we'll talk about it kind of in an order that I think might make a bit more sense. So this video might have a bit more editing than I normally would do, purely because I'm trying to make sure I put as much information as I can in. I won't necessarily be showing you how to do techniques, but if there's something that I think a tutorial is useful for, I will put it on the PDF, which will go up on my Ko-Fi page at this point, which might help you along. And simple things like an I-cord, it's very easy to find a good tutorial for it. So hopefully those sort of things I don't really need to include. This is a guide on how I did it, and hopefully giving you enough information to be able to make your own version if you want to. I think, yeah, so that there might be a bit of editing and I will do my best to keep it consistent. But it is knitted bottom up with a waistband addition to a little welt. And actually for this I did end up knitting to just past the welt, and then I knitted the top and then grafted it together. Not because I felt I needed to, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough yarn left for one other project. So I figured if I check that I can get the body out and have enough left, I would be in a better position going forward. So that's an option too. You could easily knit the top and then knit bottom down if you want. It's completely up to you. This is, like I said, I'm going to give you as many options and modifications as I can kind of offer along the way. to start this, I took some fairly simple body measurements. Again, I will put them on a PDF. So I took my bust, my waist, and my hips, and then I took sort of neck width. I refer to it as the front neck width. It's not accurate, but this is how I work, and I would love to learn more. So I took a measurement roughly where I wanted my straps, and I wanted my straps to fit in line with a few different items that I own, and you might want to do exactly the same. So I just measured from strap to strap and how much I wanted them to be. I measured from where I wanted my strap to start all the way up and round to in line with my underarm, since that was where roughly I was going to be finishing my strap and starting my strap. And this can be adjusted on the go. It helps for, you know, gauging as you're knitting. You could do, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches and then come back and check, rather than, you know, just knitting randomly and checking every half inch because you don't have an idea roughly of where you want it to be. Then I also measured from the start of the strap and where I wanted to sit on my underarm. I did make it sit a little bit lower than directly underneath, and I would recommend that, especially since I wanted to be able to wear it in summer, and with layers I thought that a little bit more wiggle room would be good. And then from the underarm to the waist, so where you want it to sit, it doesn't have to be your natural waist, it doesn't have to be the smallest part, it could be wherever you want it to sit, but from the underarm where you want the dress to sit to the waist, and then from the waist down to where you want the hem of the dress to be, past the knee, above the knee, in the middle of the thigh, whatever you want it to be. And all of these measurements could be adjusted to make a completely different item, which I think's quite good, because once you've built yourself one dress essentially, you could then adjust it for many. I'm hoping to do a 2-piece set, so a crop top and skirt, because I think, again, the way I like to use my wardrobe is to be able to mix and match, and I'm working more towards not necessarily a capsule of tiny amount of pieces, but I'm working towards a collection of items that I love that will connect and take me through the year nicely. And I think a skirt and top is a really nice way, to look coordinated, but also, you know, pairing it, a top with the jeans or linen trousers and the skirt with a linen top or a knitted top. It's just quite nice to, that was really Watford knitted, be able to have that freedom. So that's how we start, is by taking our body measurements and then making a swatch. Now, I know a lot of people don't enjoy swatching for various reasons. I don't always swatch, but I have to say I am definitely becoming more and more of an advocate for a swatch. I think it is important if you're making your own pattern up. I think the more accurate you read your swatch, the more accurate your item will come out to be, which very much makes sense, right? So make a fairly decent sized swatch. This I've written for, or I did in stockinette. So if you're doing stockinette, do a swatch in stockinette. I only swatched in the round because I roughly know where I sit slightly differently when I knit flat, and actually my gauge doesn't tend to change, which I'm quite grateful for. I'm quite lucky. There's a tiny difference, but it's not enough to warrant changing needles. But I would recommend, you know, doing some flat, because the flat knitting is quite an important part. It's the front, it's from the underarm to the top of the neck, and that section, if it doesn't sit right, it will make a big difference to your final outcome. So swatching both flat and in the round is recommended, really, and I have put in the PDF, and I'll try and link down below. Patty Lyons did an amazing video with Christy Glass, and it was about swatching. It was for one of her patterns, which is amazing. It's a beautiful pattern actually, great for summer. But I've watched that video 5 or 6 times at this point. It's so interesting, it's so thorough, and really hits home how important swatching is and how to swatch properly. So I really recommend watching that, maybe watching that while you swatch, maybe watching it before you swatch, that's up to you, but I do think, sorry, that was Alex. Hi Alex. Alex is my husband, if you're new here. When you have done your swatch, I really recommend reading it and measuring it, not just once but multiple times, so you do have an accurate representation, since you are going to be turning these numbers into your item. The closer you get it, the closer your item will be to how you finish. And if you're spending the time getting these numbers, you really may as well have it as close as you can get and as good as you can get. I think it's very sad when we do swatch and then it totally changes because we've only read it the once, and where you thought it was 4 stitches, it was actually 5 stitches per inch on average. You just read it in a place that you happen to maybe relax a bit more. So that does make quite a big difference over bigger widths, and hip measurements are quite big when it comes to our measurements, so it's quite important that we get it right so we don't cast on too many stitches and end up with something wrong, or too few stitches and ending up with something very uncomfortable, or a wiggle skirt, which might be the vibe. So that's swatching. We then work out the maths, and there's quite a few measurements or steps in knitting the dress that we need, and whilst it might seem a little bit complicated or tricky, I've been knitting for 2.5 years, which in the grand scheme of things really isn't very long. If I can figure it out and I can spend the time to do it, there's no reason why you can't. I don't want anyone to ever be afraid of knitting. I think that's a really sad, not sad, but it makes my heart go a little bit, because it's knitting. Unless it's a steek, which Alex refers to as extreme knitting, we can really almost always undo, redo or fix, and even if that's fixing with a sewing machine, we've got that option to do. So all that to say, it's really not that difficult. What I personally find more difficult is knowing the approximate eases and things that people do generally add. I kind of guess and am starting to get used to what feels good for me, which is why I haven't included and won't really include what I did in terms of adding ease, because it's so personal. Whereas I might want something really wide or really fitted, you might want something different, so I think it's important to do that. And you could guess that, well, not necessarily guess, but you can look at items that you've knitted in the past and look at the average ease that they've used, you know, on the bust and the waist, and see what you like most. You could look at items that you've already got in your wardrobe. Maybe you knitted a tank top that you love and you would like the top to fit like that. Measure that, see how that compares to your bust measurement, your waist measurement, and adjust it accordingly. You can then have a springboard to jump off into adding your own eases, if that makes sense. I really hope it does. You know, if you only add 1 inch of ease, it's going to be pretty fitted. If you add 5, looser. This is my ranunculus that actually is really big on me, and I think, yeah, so I quite like this, but I would not have knitted my dress like this. If I was doing a knitted dress that maybe looked more like the hinterland dress, which would be very possible with this, if that's how you wanted, then I might go for a lot more ease on, like I am wearing here. But does that help? I really hope it does. And then hip ease, again, you can look at skirts or dresses that you've already got, look at your trousers, see how they fit. I kind of referred to my linen trousers and then added just a little bit more ease here. When it came to the waist, I actually opted to have it a little bit, I kept quite a bit of ease, so it almost actually went straight. I did do a few increases, I think, straight after the waist, but not many at all. So I kept it fairly straight at the waist because I felt like I was going to use elastic. And this elastic I have had, my parents will remember, we had a place called Wrap, and it does still exist near where we live, and it's the Watford Arts Recycling Project or something. And I remember you paid like £10 for a year as a family, and you could go and get all this weird and wonderful stuff. As a child that grew up very creative and liked to make things, it was heavenly. From out-of-date films to like camera films, weird bits of plastic, old CDs, and elastic and wallpaper samples, which I still have a few of them from way back then. But this is from that, so this is like almost 20-year-old elastic that's still going. And I knew that I was going to put this in, so I opted to keep it a little bit wider so that I could play with it. If I want to, I could take this elastic out and cinch it in even more. I could actually totally omit the elastic and have it really oversized. Well, not really oversized, but oversized so it's a bit more loosey. So that's quite a good bit of freedom that you've got here. So you don't necessarily have to cinch it right into your waist with your knitting. You can do that by way of, you can see it's got quite a bit of, you know, I could be here all day just doing this. That's sad. So that's another measurement you'll be using is, have I done this in the right order? Probably not. I've mentioned that's ease. So let's just go back and work our way up in the way we would knit it. So this I did an I-cord cast on, and you can choose whatever cast on you like. I opted for this because I think it gives a nice finished edge. I thought that it's almost a little bit weighted, so with the alpaca it would sort of just help it fall nicely, and I think it does. You could do some garter to have that kind of vibe. I'm trying to add in modifications that you could do as well now. It's a bit crazy. But my I-cord, I went down a needle size from what I used for my stockinette, and I find that for me is quite a good way of getting a similar row gauge so that I can pick up the stitches for the amount of stitches I need to cast on. So I just make an I-cord, and I think this was, I don't know, say 200 stitches. So I did 200 stitch I-cord and then picked up along the way. And then you use, so to get that you're using your hip measurement plus your ease, which is fairly simple. I don't know, say it's 40 inches around your hips, you add in 5, 10 for your ease, so you've got 45 or 50, and then you multiply that by your stitch gauge. It might be 5, it might be 6, it might be 10, whatever it is, that's how you get that measurement. And then you knit in stockinette, and to find out roughly how many rows, you are going to use your waist to hem measurement, sorry, and that is simply that measurement times by your row gauge. You can reduce a few rows for your decreases, which you will do from your hip to your waist, or you can leave it in and adjust accordingly if you want. I did actually add some short rows, and you can see that the back sits maybe 2 inches below. Again, I'm not going to explain necessarily how I did them, because I think that is such a personal thing. I did German short rows, and I did it enough to add 2 inches along the middle. So if your row gauge is 5 rows per inch, you want roughly 10 short rows, and depending on how wide you want them, you'll adjust it accordingly. Does that make sense? So you'd have 5 pairs if you did it that way. I think that makes sense. So 2 inches drop in the back, and you've got 5 rows per inch row gauge. You're going to take the 2 inches multiplied by that, gives you 10. So you want 10 rows backing and forthing, which would be 5 sets of short rows, and depending on how wide you want them would depend on how far along each half you would go. So if you wanted them the whole way across, you could do 5 or 10 stitches in from the sides back and work back and forwards, or you could do them smaller. It's up to you, but it is really personal, and I think I can't quite, give you any more information than that. I think that's quite helpful, hopefully. Don't second guess yourself. Right, I'm going to hit pause because I didn't realise I was going to talk this long. And sipping on a coffee, which is going to go a lot colder than I thought it would. Once you have knitted all the way up, you've maybe worked your short rows or omitted them, yogi's choice. You then create a welt, which I have included a link to a video. I also use this technique in my Kalagardana top. It's something that I've absolutely loved from day one of knitting. I just think it's a fantastic technique for adding ties and waistbands. It's very easy. You are literally knitting extra rows and then going back a few rows and picking up the purl bumps on the inside of your knitting to effectively create a tube. It's very simple, but I think it's important to spend a little moment thinking about what you want to put in here, because you could do a really wide welt with a really chunky bit of elastic, I guess, something more like this thickness if you wanted, and that would be, I would recommend that if you are using quite a heavy yarn, maybe even, is cotton quite heavy? Yeah, I would maybe use a thicker, but you could also use a knitted I-cord very easily. The knitted I-cord's quite good because, again, you could reinforce that by even inserting a shoelace through it if you wanted. It gives you a lot more stability than maybe elastic, but I had this and I quite like the freedom that elastic gives. But I think a drawstring, even with a cute little ribbon, would be lovely, especially if you're downsizing this for a little one. No pressure to do so, but how cute would that be? So yeah, we also decrease before we do the welt. So I'm very sorry that this is a bit chaotic. But you decrease for the waist. If you're doing that, you might actually find you totally don't want to, and you want to knit essentially a tube and use just the welt to create shaping. I'm just talking these ideas through. You could literally do anything. It's brilliant. But yeah, so the decreases are fairly simple to figure out. We take our hip measurement and our waist measurement, both with the ease added, and then we minus the waist measurement from the hip measurement, and we get the amount of decreases we need. And you can do them over 1 or 2 rows, maybe even 3 rows. It's again up to you, depending whether you want it to just scooch in. I did, because the waist has the welt, it doesn't notice, but if you did want to taper it more slowly, you could do it over a few rows and have X amount of rows in between. This is all down to your personal preference, your own style, which is the best bit about this. Very simple, but again, just make sure you remember to use your eases and spread the stitches out evenly across the row. Simple. And then after you've done your welt, you decide if you're going to need to increase for the bust. Maybe you go straight up. This is all personal preference, really, depending on how you want it to fit. So you knit all the way up to where you are ready. Once you've done these decreases, again, if you're increasing for the bust, you have your bust measurement plus the ease and minus the waist measurement plus the ease. And that will give you the amount of increases you need, or potentially decreases depending. Using your underarm to waist measurement in stockinette until you are ready to then bind off for the back. Here it is quite important to think about how busty you or the recipient is going to be, because I am not. I could knit a tube and just cinch it in and there you go, I've got a dress. But if you've got a bigger bust, you might want to have more of the stitches come forward into the bust so that the back sits more flush against your back and you've got a bit more room in the front. Again, you might want the opposite. I don't know how you want it to be. But have a think and divide the stitches accordingly. You can measure around, so take the underarm measurement from here to here. Decide on if you want any ease to be included in that and how much. And you will then take that measurement plus the ease that you would like to include and minus it from the bust circumference plus ease that you've already got on your needles. So that leaves you with the amount you want to sit at the front here. You will leave... Oh really? Now she wants to go out, but she's just come in from upstairs. Bear with me. Hopefully I haven't forgotten where I was at. So then I left stitches on hold on the back. You don't have to, you could wait and join that, like bind them all off and join it again wherever you see fit at the end. But I left 6 stitches either side of the back. I opted to do it a bit wider. I might, if I do it again, and I could just undo it and change it, match it to the front neck so it goes across straight. I opted to do it about ½ inch wider on each side, so 1 inch wider, but it's very easy to adjust. But then you're basically going around, starting where, I started my beginning of the round on the side and just bind off stitches, leaving 6 if you want, or not, just binding all the way off apart from this section on the front that you want to be the underarm to the front. It's very easy. But from there, once you've bound off your stitches, you're then working backwards and forwards to do these decreases along the front to bring the underarm in to where you want the straps to sit. So to figure this out, you take your measurement from the front neck to the underarm, and then you multiply that by your row gauge, so that's how many rows you have to do your decreases within. And then to get the amount of decreases you want, so then you're going from underarm to underarm and using that as your starting point, and then you're minusing from it your front neck measurement, and then you times that by the stitches, or the stitch gauge, and that gives you how many decreases you need to do. And you can decide if you want to do them really quickly and have a bit that goes straight up. You might want to do them really gradually. I opted for more of a sort of raglan shaping, I guess, so going smooth diagonal. If you need to do more, you might want to add extra decreases at the side, you might want to spread some throughout. This is all really personal preference. I actually decided to spread them out enough so that it did continue to taper, but you, like I was saying, you could taper it and then do a little bit extra that just goes straight so it sits flush. And again, you can be playful. I opted to do them maybe 2 or 3 stitches in from the edge. You could turn it into more of an I-cord edging. You could almost do a ribbing and then do the final few rows in ribbing. And you could do that on the back too, 6 rows before the underarm. You could work those rows in ribbing if you wanted it to. I'm quite happy with it rolling, and it kind of goes with the I-cord. But that's how you get that. It's really quite simple, but it does take a bit of time to get it how you want it to be. I really hope this is useful. I hope that I have maybe inspired you to, even if you just do a skirt or just do the top version, I hope that it's inspiring you to try it. And then for the straps, you're taking that front neck to back underarm measurement and knitting a double I-cord. And you could do this in garter stitch. You could actually do 6 stitches and then cast on 6 and knit it in garter, or in just stockinette if that makes you happy. And then you have a bigger hole to thread maybe ribbon through if you want it to be really secure at the top. You've then got double width. It's totally up to you what you do. I think it's quite cool. Like, I imagined how nice it would be if you did, like I said, cast on extra stitches at the back, so you had the full 6 stitch width and did a cable along the top and then matched the cable along the side. There's so many options. I used like I said, the stitches and did a 3 needle bind off at the back, but you could graft this using Kitchener, you could just sew it in. There's so many options. So that is my little rebel dress. I really hope I've covered enough here. I think I have. I spent quite a long time over the weekend thinking about this. Sunday night I started making the PDF because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain and think about all the steps that I did, but I will finish the PDF today and hopefully it will be useful. Again, it's not really a pattern, it's a guide on how I made this, and in a hope that you could make your own. I think it would be lovely in a linen, or a linen cotton blend or a linen silk blend. In the winter, a big woolly one that comes down past the knees would be lovely. And again, if you were worried about running out, knit the top, maybe knit it with sleeves if that's what you're vibing, if it's going to be for winter. Add long sleeves, but knit the top and then start at the welt. If you've put a provisional cast on in, just knit down and knit as long as you possibly can. Have a floor length knitted dress. You will be the coziest belle at the ball. No judgment. Anyone can wear this, I think. But yeah, really happy with it, and I am quite excited that I have been able to hopefully express and maybe inspire you to give it a go. I don't know. Anyway, life update quickly. I will include some footage from our weekend at the end, like I try and do. Hopefully it's a nice little peaceful moment for you, maybe a bit less chaotic than whatever this is. And I think there'll be some nice moments. I think from memory there's some pretty moments for you. I'm not sure if I should be posting my skating videos here. I did put some in last week. I recently took up roller skating, if you're new here, very recently, 2 weeks ago, and I absolutely love it, but I'm not sure if that's something everyone wants to see. If you do, maybe let me know. I don't know, I'm really quite enjoying it and it's really nice to be able to share the progress, but if it's a bit too off kilter, I get it too, and I'll keep it just on a separate Instagram and it will be there. So let me know about that. If you do end up making a dress or a top or a skirt, I guess, or anything with this help, that would be great to see. Don't be afraid to share. You could totally use the flower motif and have the cutest little dress. Eternal Spring. Thank you everyone who downloaded it on Ravelry. We were on the front page for a while, you guys. Thank you, Liz, for letting me know. I would never have seen it otherwise. Yeah, if you do have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. I will do my absolute best, but reiterating again, I am quite new to knitting, really. I just do what works for me, and we are all different. But if there's anything I can do to help, please just ask. I think that is all the waffle. If you enjoyed this sort of video, again, please let me know. I will then try and be more conscious when I'm knitting other items that I am making up as I go along, to maybe do this style where I'm not necessarily giving you the numbers because we're all so different, but giving you how I did it. If that's useful, that's something that I can go forward and try and do. It might make my life a little bit more freeing and creative, because sometimes it gets quite nerve-wracking when people are asking if I'm going to be able to release something, and I just can't, because I don't have the knowledge on grading to be able to do it. But I could do this kind of video where I go through it in a little bit more detail and try and break down how I got to where I got to. Again, it's always nice for feedback, just to know what you enjoy, what you don't. I will always continue to be my strange self, farm emo meets hippie, I guess. But you know, it's nice to be able to connect and give back. That's one of my things at the moment. It's really nice to be able to give back to the community that has so, I don't know, kindly welcomed me in and made such a big difference to my life. Ko-Fi has been one of my saving graces this year. I can't believe how much of a difference it's made. I feel like I'm in a really good place right now, mentally and physically, 10 times compared to how I have felt in the last few years, and that is, you know, down to the kindness. So thank you so much. I really will stop waffling now. Thank you so much for being here. Look after one another, send each other kind messages as and when you can, call your loved ones, call your family, send snail mail, do something that makes you laugh, and don't forget to love each other. What a long public service announcement. Anyway, you are amazing. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you again very soon.